Hi, I'm Kim Copperthwaite. I'm an English language arts teacher at Freeport Middle School in Freeport, Maine. I'm a teaching consultant, and I also am working on peace literacy curriculum development. In this video, I'm going to be reviewing Lesson 2 of the unit Navigating Crisis, Uncertainty, and Technology in a Global Pandemic, and I'm going to describe how I did this lesson with my 7th grade students at the end of the year as we were ending our school year of online learning. This unit was written by Paul K. Chappell, Peace Literacy and Leadership Director for the Nuclear Age Peace Foundation, by Stephanie Clapes, Learning Specialist and Educational Consultant, and Donna Cowell, Curriculum Specialist. The entire unit can be found on the Peace Literacy website, peaceliteracy.org, under Curriculum. So the title of this lesson is Navigating Uncharted Waters, and an essential question that I pointed out to students from this lesson is, why is it important to attend to non-physical needs in a crisis? In this lesson, students recognize the uncertainties of the pandemic through the metaphor of uncharted waters. In the slides, the metaphor of the boat going through the storm is continued, and then it's highlighted that the water that we are going through in this boat, as a metaphor for COVID-19, is new and completely uncharted. At this point, I mentioned to students one of the concepts that I learned in my peace literacy training, and that is that human beings do not like the unknown. They want explanations for things, and especially during this time in the world where we have technology and science, yet we still don't have all the answers, that it makes the world especially anxious and makes people especially nervous. So I did point that out to them. We also talk about in this lesson that students learn that empathy and attention during a crisis are crucial. These non-physical needs are just as important as physical needs. The slides use the metaphor, again, of being on a ship and sailors being deficient of vitamin C and it causing scurvy in the body. Likewise, people who do not get enough attention and empathy, especially during a crisis, become equally non-functional or deficient. So here are some of the steps that I took and activities that I did with the students for Lesson 2. I first asked them to watch the slides very carefully. Again, make sure the slides, that you cue your students to put the slides on present so they can see some of the motion in the slides. And then I prepared a question set for them. I'm going to show you here on the screen, if I can, the question set. There it is. I'll scroll up to the top. I typed this up on a Google Doc, put it on my Google Classroom. Students made a copy, typed the answers, and turned it back in on Google Classroom. So I took mostly the questions that were on the slide presentation. I believe I added number 1. I don't think this one was on the presentation. And this is to ask students to think about what they're seeing visually and to describe it in words. And this is a concept we've been working on in our classroom, visual literacy, so that when they're looking at a slide presentation, they're looking at it as a visual text for clues. And so my expectation here is that they would have written about a paragraph that described what they were seeing in color, in shape, in objects, and also what the slides were trying to elicit from them for a mood as they were looking at it. The next few questions talk about empathy and attention, what happens when people do not get that, what happens when people do get empathy and attention, and how that can increase the positive function of a community. Number 7 is a question I added a little bit more to. Think of someone right now in your life that may need the nourishment of empathy and attention. What are some creative ways you can reach out to that person? Give it a try in the next day or two if you can, and describe what happens below. Or if you're not able to reach out to someone, describe how you would like to someday. This was the students are going to be asked to develop this idea a little bit further in the next lesson. So when you work with your students on the questions, encourage them to use elaboration and refer back to the information in the text. Encourage them to really read the slide presentation more deeply than they may have been used to reading online presentations in the past. The slides are a text, so you want them to refer back to it and get the information that they need. One point that I make with students and teachers a lot is that thinking and writing is rehearsal for speaking. So in this lesson, I brought their thinking into an online discussion. So students were asked to complete an attention and empathy experiment. So that question 7 was developed a little bit more. They had to choose an experiment and reflect upon it. And then we all came together online for a Zoom discussion. So I was looking for them to take that thinking and writing that they had done and pull it into their speaking so that they sounded, so that the conversation became more rich and evidence-based. I did put here at the bottom a recommendation that I would not do it again as a whole group online using Zoom. I had 25 students at a time on the screen. It was too much, and some kids it was easy for them to just kind of ghost out of it. So I would recommend, and I will do this when I do it again, to break students into small groups of 4 or 5 and meet with them at set times throughout the day if you're teaching online. If you're in a classroom environment doing this type of discussion, you can do it whole group, or you can break it out into small groups of discussions and then go around and visit each of the small groups. So here are a couple student responses to the question. One of them said, my favorite slide was slide number 15. I liked the colors that were used that gave it a space-like feel. It had a peaceful calm to it. When I first looked at it, I thought that it was just the silhouette of a person, but then I looked closer and realized that the person is standing next to a dog. I think the slide caught my attention because it reminded me of the night sky in Acadia National Park, because although you can see more stars in Acadia than are in the picture, they both have the same sort of peaceful calm. This is the kind of response I love to see because it shows a personal connection to what they're learning and what they're reviewing. The next student said, when a person gets the nutrients of empathy and attention, it can help to feel closer to the person, even if physically you are apart. Empathy and attention can also affect our inner world by making us healthier and stronger. It can also make friendships and school community healthier and strong with trust. So there I can see she really got the concepts of the slides. All right, I asked students to do an attention and empathy experiment, and they could choose what they wanted to do. I offered them a list of ideas, and here are some of the experiments that they did. One of my students made a poster and a thank you note and left it for a mail carrier, and then recorded the response that the mail carrier was jumping up and down and waving, and he waved to the mail carrier out the window, and it made him feel pretty happy. One boy encouraged his father to jump with him on their trampoline in the backyard to relieve stress. And he said he and his dad had a great time. He hadn't spent time with his dad like that in forever. And he felt really good about seeing his dad laugh and have fun. Another student told me that he really started talking to his siblings, like really talking to them. And he found out that they weren't the irritating little people that he thought they were. And he wrote a lot about that how the pandemic and being at home together and doing this experiment opened up an opportunity to really get to know them. Several students wrote old-fashioned letters to their grandparents who were in isolation. And a couple of them got some notes and cards back that they enjoyed. One girl empathized with her mother, who was a nurse and had been putting in long hours, and she decided to text her mother every morning a beautiful quote about love, appreciation, and resiliency. And this student wrote just this beautiful reflection on how her mother was in tears and appreciated her, and she was in tears, and they had a very loving and huggy moment that they hadn't taken time to do with one another in a very, very long time. So learning outcomes. I hope this isn't too distracting, but I thought this was perfect for attention and empathy because it's a picture of my daughter with her baby from a few years ago, my granddaughter, just showing that how basic attention is and empathy is to human development. We know this in the early days, but it continues throughout our lifetime needing that attention and empathy. So what I saw in my students was an understanding of empathy and intent and attention as being important non-physical needs. They translated their visual literacy, their understanding of what they were seeing in the slides, into writing. And I did notice that students who had written more deeply were able to speak far more skillfully when we got into the Zoom meeting. And most of all in this lesson, empathy put into action. I asked them to do an experiment with empathy, put it into action, and reflect upon it. And I just thought even if there were some simple reflections and simple actions, it was something that a student had never been really asked to do and write about as an academic assignment. So I was really pleased with that, and I hope you give this lesson a try with your own students.